Are you ready to uncover some ancient mysteries that would rewrite history? From the Virgin Mary's lost tomb to time-traveling angels and proof that dinosaurs are mentioned in the Bible, prepare to have your minds blown. Number 11. Finding Mary's tomb. Who would you say is the most famous woman in history? Cleopatra? Joan of Arc? Maybe even Taylor Swift? Well, biblical scholars would say that it's none of these women. They would argue that the most renowned woman throughout history is none other than the mother of Christ, the Virgin Mary. Mary's story is surrounded by legends and mysteries. Despite her fame, few physical relics have been associated with her over time. However, one spot that continues to attract believers and tourists alike is a tomb at the foot of the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, which is said to be Mary's burial place. Now, here's where it gets interesting. There are two main versions of what happened to Mary. The first is from the Bible, and the second from the ancient Jewish text Tol.Yeshu. Both agree that Mary, or Miriam as she was known in Hebrew, was the mother of Jesus, but they differ in some details. According to Christian tradition, Mary passed away peacefully, almost as if she were just falling asleep. It's not clear how old she was when she died, but the Dormition of Theotokos, a text about Mary's death, claims that she was actually resurrected, just like her son. The text also says that her tomb was found empty 3 days after her funeral. Sound familiar? The Catholic Encyclopedia backs up this Jerusalem burial story, suggesting that early writings and sources from as far back as the 2nd century agree that Mary's life ended in Jerusalem. Some of these old texts include the Acts of St. John and letters written by religious figures in the 4th century. But if she was buried in Jerusalem, as many believe, where is her body? It's nowhere to be found. What happened to it? Legends say that her body was taken up to heaven 3 days after she died. So, did she really leave Earth like her son, body and soul? Many Christians think so. However, others have raised doubts. In the 5th century, the Emperor Marcion and his wife Pulcheria requested relics of Mary. The Patriarch of Jerusalem, Juvenal, responded that there were no relics left because, well, Mary's body was gone. The tomb at the foot of the Mount of Olives itself has been revered as a sacred site since the early days of Christianity. In 1972, Bellarmino Bagatti, a Franciscan friar and archaeologist, excavated the site. He believed the tomb was part of a 1st century cemetery, and even though it was hard to date the chambers precisely, he was convinced it could be the famous burial place of Mary. Over time, the site has seen many changes. At one point, a beautiful church stood nearby, built by the Crusaders in the 12th century. But unfortunately, it was destroyed by Saladin in 1187, though the crypt remained untouched. This location wasn't just special to Christians. Even during Muslim rule, it was considered the burial place of Jesus' mother. Today, it still draws crowds from around the world, despite ongoing debates about whether it really is Mary's tomb. Inside the crypt, visitors can find chapels dedicated to St. Joseph and Mary's parents, Joachim and Anne, as well as the tomb of Queen Melisande of Jerusalem. But was Mary's body really in that tomb for 3 days? Did she ascend to heaven just as Jesus did? No one can say for sure, but her legacy as one of the most important women in history is undeniable. Do you believe that Mary was a real person? If so, where do you think she was buried? And what happened to her body? Let me know in the comments down below. Number 10. The childhood home of Jesus. Ken Darke, an archaeologist from England, might have just made one of the most exciting discoveries in recent history: the childhood home of Jesus Christ. This is the potential home of one of the most famous figures ever. But the story of how this place was uncovered is just as fascinating as the discovery itself. So let's take a little trip back to Nazareth in the late 1800s when some nuns stumbled upon something incredible. In 1881, the Sisters of Nazareth Convent was being built. As these nuns dug into the earth, they found a hidden ancient cistern. Now, these nuns weren't professional archaeologists, but they were curious enough to investigate. While they didn't fully understand what they had found, they made records, and their work was a huge help to archaeologists later on. Fast forward to the mid-20th century when a Jesuit priest took another crack at investigating the site. However, it wasn't until Ken Darke and his team showed up in 2006 that the real excitement began. They were there to study Byzantine history, they ended up finding something far more interesting than they expected. Beneath layers of history, they uncovered a 1st century house which had been turned into a quarry and then a tomb, before becoming the site of a Byzantine church. This ancient house wasn't just any ordinary structure. According to historical records, including writings from the 7th century by a pilgrim named Adomnan, this might be the Church of the Nutrition. And if you're wondering why that name matters, it's because it was believed to be built on the very spot where Jesus was raised. Yep, right on top of his childhood home. As the excavation continued, Dark and his team found more clues that matched Adomnan's description. The Byzantine church, decorated in a grand style, was built over a crypt which housed 2 Roman tombs. And between those tombs was a house. Could this be the house where Jesus grew up? Dark was cautious about making such a bold claim, but according to him, people living much closer to Jesus' time certainly believed it was. Dark didn't go looking for this discovery. He was originally just trying to learn more about the Byzantine pilgrimage center in Nazareth. So imagine his surprise when he found what might be one of the most important homes in human history. While Dark isn't 100% sure this is the childhood home of Jesus, he's confident that the Byzantines believed it was. And that has to count for something, right? What do you think? Did Ken Dark really find the very place where Jesus transitioned from boy to man? It's not certain, but the evidence seems to suggest that it's a possibility. Who knew that a bunch of nuns with shovels back in 1881 would lead to one of the most interesting archaeological finds of the last 2 millennia? Number 9. Demons were the good guys. What if the Bible and every religion on the planet got it wrong? What if demons were actually the good guys? There's a wild conspiracy theory that suggests just that, but does it have a leg to stand on? So according to the Bible, Lucifer, aka the devil, got booted out of heaven because he didn't want to worship God. Instead, he wanted to be worshipped himself, and as a result, he was cast into hell along with a bunch of angels who became demons. But here's where the theory shakes things up. What if Lucifer wasn't evil, but was just fighting for freedom? What if he and the other angels didn't want to be slaves to God anymore, and that's why they were punished? I mean, imagine taking orders from someone who thinks that they're always right. They never let you question them or do your own thing. Wouldn't that be the very definition of a dictator? Now, I'm not saying God is a dictator, but if he wasn't involved in that scenario, what would you call them? Some people who believe in this theory argue that demons aren't as bad as they're made out to be. They say demons, including Lucifer, are actually kind and protective. Instead of demanding worship or souls in exchange for help, you know, classic horror movie stuff, these demons supposedly work with people to protect them with no strings attached. Does that sound like the ultimate plot twist or what? Now, this isn't meant to mess with anyone's beliefs. It's just an idea floating out there. Some folks think that God's ultimatum, worship me or else, sounds kind of harsh, while demons are portrayed as more chill, just wanting to help. Of course, this is all just a theory, but it makes you think, right? Could the story of heaven and hell be more complicated than good versus evil? What do you think? Number 8. Jesus, Harry Potter, Christ. This one is for all you Harry Potter fans out there. Did you know that the story of the boy wizard might actually be based on the story of Jesus? Yep, you heard that right. J.K. Rowling even said that the religious parallels in her books have always been obvious to her, but she kept it quiet so that readers could just enjoy the story. Now let's dive into why some people think Harry Potter is like a modern retelling of the Gospel. First off, Harry's story begins with an act of sacrificial love. His mother, Lily Potter, gives her life to save Harry from the evil Voldemort. Her love is so powerful that it actually defeats Voldemort, well, at least for a while, and protects Harry. Dumbledore explains that Lily's sacrifice lives on in Harry, much like the way Christians believe Jesus' sacrifice protects them. Love in Harry Potter is the most powerful form of magic, even stronger than death itself. Sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? The Bible often speaks about love, sacrifice, and the power of blood. Just like Lily's love protects Harry, Jesus' sacrifice is set to protect humanity. One of the most striking connections is on Harry's parents' tombstone. It reads, "The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death," which comes straight from 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 26 in the Bible. Death is a huge theme in the series. Voldemort is obsessed with conquering death, using Horcruxes, pieces of his soul hidden in objects, to try to become immortal. But to beat Voldemort, Harry must give himself over to death. Again, this parallels the story of Jesus. Jesus had to sacrifice himself to save the world, and Harry, in a similar way, sacrifices himself to defeat Voldemort. In one of the most emotional scenes, Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest, knowing he has to die. It's a powerful moment, much like Jesus' walk to his crucifixion. But surprise, surprise, Harry doesn't actually die. He wakes up in what looks like King's Cross Station. Get it? King's Cross? There he meets Dumbledore, who tells him that his mother's love saved him yet again, and he's not really dead. Finally, when Harry returns to life, his friend's grief turns to joy, just like the followers of Jesus when they saw him alive after his resurrection. Voldemort's curses fail, and his snake Nagini is killed, echoing the Bible's prophecy about the serpent's head being crushed for tricking Eve in the Garden of Eden. By the end of the series, Harry's scar hasn't hurt for 19 years and everything is peaceful. This is pretty similar to the Bible's vision of a world without pain or death, where all is well. So, is Harry Potter a retelling of the story of Jesus? Maybe not exactly, but the connections are definitely there. Who knew that under all the wands and spells, there might be a bit of the Bible hidden in Hogwarts? And now for a quick break. But first, I wanted to give a shout out and big thank you to Guntaz and Daniel Holland 20 Twin for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. Anunnaki Tower of Babel. So you've probably heard the story of the Tower of Babel, right? You know, the one where humans try to build a huge tower to reach the heavens, and then God gets mad and confuses their language so they can't understand each other anymore? But did you know that according to the ancient astronaut theory, this famous story might actually involve aliens, specifically Marduk, an Anunnaki god? Buckle up, because this gets wild. Let's start with the Anunnaki. The ancient astronaut theory claims that the Anunnaki were ancient alien gods who came to Earth from a distant planet called Nibiru. They played a huge role in shaping early human civilizations, especially in places like Sumer, Babylon, and Egypt. Now, Marduk, one of the most powerful of these Anunnaki gods, had big plans. He wanted to build a massive spaceport, yes, a spaceport, in Babylon, so he could communicate directly with his home planet, Nibiru. But why did Marduk need this spaceport? Well, there was some serious alien family drama going on. Marduk was in a power struggle with Inanna, another Anunnaki goddess. Inanna, who ruled over the Indus Valley, wanted to expand her territory into Marduk's turf, Egypt. But Marduk went by a different name in Egypt. Ra. The conflict heated up when Inanna tried to marry Marduk's brother, Dumuzi, to gain power. However, Dumuzi died unexpectedly. Some even think Marduk might have been involved. As the story goes, Inanna's plan failed, at least for the moment. With the threat from Inanna still looming, Marduk needed a way to secure his power. And that's where the Tower of Babel comes in. According to this theory, the tower wasn't just a fancy building. It was meant to be a communication hub with Nibiru. Why? So Marduk could plead his case to the Council of Anunnaki Gods and complain about Inanna trying to steal his territory. But there was a problem. The other Anunnaki gods, especially Enlil, another big shot among the Anunnaki, weren't too happy about Marduk's tower. They didn't want him to have a direct line to Nibiru because it would give him too much power. So what did Enlil do? According to the story, he confused the languages of Marduk's followers. One day they're all working together on the tower, and the next they're speaking gibberish to each other. With everyone unable to understand one another, the construction of Marduk's spaceport came to a screeching halt. In the end, Marduk's plan to build a Tower of Babel was thwarted, not by human failure, but by an alien power struggle. According to the ancient astronaut theory, the whole thing was part of a larger cosmic battle between the Anunnaki gods for control over Earth and its territories. Number 6. Time-traveling angels. Imagine if angels weren't just heavenly beings with wings, but actually time travelers sent to warn humanity. Well, according to a fascinating theory, that's exactly what they were. This mind-bending idea might change the way you see the Bible. The theory suggests that the angels we read about in ancient texts were actually humans from the future. These time travelers were tasked with delivering important messages to people in the past, specifically to biblical writers like Ezekiel, Daniel, and John. But here's the twist. These writers misunderstood what they saw. Instead of interpreting these encounters as futuristic visitors, they framed them in the context of their own cultural and religious beliefs, calling them angels or divine beings. Have you ever wondered why some words in translations seem off? That's because translators often let their own biases influence how they interpret ancient texts. This means that the original messages get obscured over time. The theory claims these time travelers left behind vital information meant to be understood in a way that felt real to people of that time, rather than supernatural. They wanted future generations to recognize these encounters as tangible events, helping to correct misunderstandings and unnecessary traditions. So what kind of future information did these time travelers share? Well, the biblical accounts often describe dreams and visions that might actually relate to historical events we recognize today. For example, they predicted wars, astronomical happenings, and even the emergence of various religions. It's like these ancient authors were peering into a crystal ball but had no idea what they were seeing. Time travelers didn't just stick to biblical history. They influenced other cultures too. They were often seen as gods or wise beings because they brought advanced technology from the future. Think of it like bringing a smartphone to a medieval village. These advanced gadgets would have seemed like magic. Just imagine how people in ancient times would react if someone showed them a hologram. They'd probably think you were a wizard. Ronald Pegg, a proponent of this theory, argues that many stories in religious texts aren't about divine interventions, but about these time travelers sharing knowledge from modern history. It's like they had DVDs or data discs showing the future, but the people they visited couldn't comprehend what they were witnessing. Instead of seeing it as technology, they interpreted it as something magical. One fascinating piece of evidence involves a mysterious photograph from the 1800s showing 8 Mormon witnesses with an artifact that didn't fit the time. It was too advanced for that era, and the dimensions were all wrong. Some say it looks like a plastic CD jewel case, even though plastic hadn't even been invented yet. In a nutshell, this theory invites us to rethink our understanding of biblical narratives and the nature of angels. What if these divine messengers were simply humans from the future trying to guide us? Maybe the next time you hear about angels, you'll picture them in cool spacesuits instead of flowing robes. Number 5. The burial box of James. Nowhere in the Bible does it state that Jesus had any siblings. But what if he did? Listen to this and let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. The James ossuary is a limestone box that might hold the bones of none other than James, the alleged brother of Jesus. This little box has caused big waves in the world of archaeology. Its story is so dramatic, it could be a plot in a mystery novel. The box itself is ancient, no doubt about that. It dates back to somewhere between the 1st century BC and 70 AD. But it's the inscription on the box, which reads, James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus, in Aramaic, that set off a massive controversy. In 2002, an Israeli collector named Oded Golan introduced the world to this box. He claimed that it could be the first physical evidence of Jesus' existence, but not everyone thought so. Soon after, scholars and archaeologists started questioning whether the inscription was real or just a clever fake. After all, the box was purchased from an antiquities dealer, and nobody knows exactly where it came from before that. Without a proper archaeological dig, suspicions ran wild. Two respected experts in ancient writing, paleographers André Lemaire and Ada Yardeni, gave the inscription their stamp of approval. But then the Israeli Antiquities Authority threw a wrench in the works by setting up a committee of scholars to study the inscription. And guess what? This group declared the inscription to be a modern forgery. They said someone had tampered with the box, adding the brother of Jesus part later. This kicked off what people called the forgery trial of the century. Oded Golan and several others were accused of running a massive forgery ring. For 7 long years, this courtroom drama played out with over 138 witnesses, 400 exhibits, and 12,000 pages of testimony. The courtroom was filled with experts passionately arguing over 20 ancient letters carved into stone. In 2012, Golan was acquitted of the forgery charges, though he was convicted of some minor stuff like trading antiquities without a license. So the box wasn't proven to be a fake, but it wasn't cleared of suspicion either. The whole affair left everyone scratching their heads. Was this relic really the burial box of James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus, mentioned in the New Testament? Or was the whole world getting punked by some ancient, or not so ancient, con artist? The combination of names, James, Joseph, and Jesus, isn't super common. Plus, mentioning a brother on a burial box was rare at the time. If the inscription is authentic, it's further proof that Jesus was a significant figure back then. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Just when it seemed like the ossuary might be the ultimate artifact for New Testament fans, doubts crept back in. For starters, the IAA's experts weren't entirely unbiased. It turned out that the leader of the committee that declared the inscription a fake had been critical of the ossuary from the start. So, was their investigation fair? And while some people accepted their findings, others continued to believe in the ossuary's authenticity. In 2015, the box made headlines again, with a CNN special reigniting the debate. But after all this time, experts still can't agree. Some claim the inscription is genuine, while others stick to their guns, insisting that it's a modern addition. So, what does it all mean? Well, it's complicated. If the inscription is real, this would be the first physical evidence of Jesus' existence, an absolutely mind-blowing discovery. It would also prove that Jesus was not an only child, as the Bible would have us believe. But because of all the controversy and the shady circumstances surrounding its discovery, the mystery of the James ossuary will likely never be solved. It's a classic maybe, maybe not scenario, leaving historians, archaeologists, and conspiracy theorists not knowing what to believe. Is it real? Is it fake? What do you think? Number 4. Dinosaurs in the Bible. Most people think the Bible doesn't mention dinosaurs at all, but guess what? If you dig a little deeper, you'll find some intriguing references about gigantic creatures that might just fit the bill. Let's start by talking about Job. In Job chapter 40 verse 15, God brings up an animal called Behemoth. Now, you won't find the word dinosaur in the Bible because that term was only coined in 1841 by a guy named Sir Richard Owen, but the description of Behemoth sounds a lot like what we'd consider a Brachiosaurus, those huge long-necked plant eaters. God says, "Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you." This implies that Behemoth was alive at the same time as Job. Now, here's a fun thought. When people picture dragons, they often imagine fire-breathing lizards that fly around in fairy tales. But what if these dragon legends actually came from real-life encounters with dinosaurs? The Bible mentions dragons quite a bit, using the Hebrew word tannin. This word pops up almost 30 times. How wild is that? Some passages suggest these dragons could have been dinosaurs, or at least dragon-like creatures. The Bible describes dragons as fire-breathing animals. It sounds a bit far-fetched until you learn about the bombardier beetle, a little insect that can shoot a hot, explosive liquid from its backside. If this tiny creature can do it, who's to say that some dinosaurs didn't have a similar fiery ability? Maybe they were just misunderstood by ancient civilizations who thought they were magical. And let's not forget about Leviathan, another fantastic creature mentioned in the book of Job. God describes Leviathan as a massive sea monster that breathes smoke. The Bible goes into detail about Leviathan, leading us to believe it was a real creature. There are even fossils of great sea-dwelling reptiles that suggest dinosaurs were swimming around while humans were on land. What's even cooler? In 1970, cave paintings in Zimbabwe depicted dinosaurs, created by Bushmen who lived in the area. These ancient artists painted what they saw, including what looked like an Apatosaurus. Then there's the amazing discovery in Arizona, where dinosaur carvings were found alongside tracks left by these ancient giants. So next time someone says dinosaurs weren't mentioned in the Bible, you can confidently tell them about Behemoth, Leviathan, and those dragon-like creatures. But what do you think? Is this enough proof that dinosaurs once lived alongside humans? Number 3. His wife and children. Settling down and having children is a normal part of growing up. And yet this wasn't something Jesus did. He never took a wife and he never had kids. Or did he? There's an ancient text that claims Jesus wasn't exactly abstinent. But if that's the case, why does the Bible say otherwise? The text, written in 570 AD in Syriac, a language Jesus would have spoken, has been chilling in the British Library for years. It's known as the Lost Gospel. Most scholars found it pretty boring until recently when Simcha Jacobovici and Barry Wilson brought its contents to light. Jacobovici and Wilson translated the manuscript and believe that it tells a secret story, one in which Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene. Most biblical experts will have you believe that Mary was a prostitute, but according to this story, she was actually the original Virgin Mary. But how could that be? Jacobovici and Wilson think they've cracked the code, literally. According to them, the story is hidden within the Old Testament tale about Joseph and his wife, Asenath. In this theory, Joseph represents Jesus and Asenath is Mary Magdalene. That's right, they claim that the story is encrypted because it was written by persecuted Christians. But before you get too excited, not everyone is on board. Mark Goodacre, a professor of religious studies at Duke University, isn't convinced. He flat out told Good Morning America that there's no credibility to these claims. He said that there's no actual evidence in the text suggesting Jesus was married or that he had children. This isn't the first time people have speculated about Jesus being married, though. A similar claim popped up in an ancient Egyptian papyrus known as the Gospel of Jesus' Wife. But that text was written centuries after Jesus' time. And let's not forget the Da Vinci Code. Dan Brown had everyone buzzing with the idea that Mary Magdalene was actually Jesus' secret wife. So, did Jesus really have a family, or is this just another historical mystery? And if Jesus did settle down, what would be so wrong about that? Why would there be such a massive cover-up to conceal this fact? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Number 2. The Merneptah Stele. What if I told you there was a secret hidden in plain sight, a forgotten piece of history that could rewrite everything we know about the ancient world? A stone that holds the key to one of the most enduring mysteries of all time. The Merneptah Stele is a puzzle, and today we're going to try and piece it together. The Merneptah Stele, sometimes called the Israel Stele, is a big deal in archaeology, especially if you're into ancient Egypt or early Israelite history. Imagine stumbling upon a 10-foot-tall slab of black granite that claims a pharaoh wiped out Israel. Well, that's essentially what happened when famous archaeologist Flinders Petrie unearthed the stele in 1896. It was discovered in the ancient Egyptian city of Thebes, or modern-day Luxor. The stele dates back to Pharaoh Merneptah, the son of Ramses II, who ruled in the late 13th century BC. Merneptah was already a 70-year-old dude when he became pharaoh, but he wasn't letting age slow him down. Nope, this guy was busy flexing his military muscles, bragging about conquering everyone from the Libyans to the Canaanites. Oh, and Israel too. And that's where things get super interesting. Why is this stele important? Well, it holds the earliest known reference to Israel outside of the Bible, literally carved in stone. On the stele, Merneptah boasts that he laid waste to Israel and that its seed is no more. Now, we don't know exactly what that means, but it proves that ancient Egyptians knew about the Israelites as early as 1200 BC. Some historians see this as confirmation of the biblical stories about the Israelites in Canaan. But were they already established there, or were they just a group on the rise? Either way, it's hard to overstate how big of a discovery this was for historians and archaeologists trying to figure out what was going on in the ancient Near East. The stele itself is more than just a name drop of Israel, though. It's a victory proclamation from Merneptah, who was out here conquering cities and crushing enemies left and right. He wasn't shy about it either. The inscriptions on the stele read like an ancient brag sheet. From Canaan to Libya, no one was safe from the pharaoh's campaigns. Some of the cities mentioned, like Giza and Ascaluni, were important trade centers at the time, and the stele makes it clear that Egypt was a force to be reckoned with under Merneptah's rule. But what makes this stone even more fascinating is the mystery it presents. Why did Merneptah include Israel in his victory list? Was it a serious threat to his empire, or just another enemy among many? Scholars have been debating that for over a century, and we still don't have a solid answer. But hey, history's all about those unsolved mysteries, right? The Merneptah Stele is a crucial piece of the puzzle in understanding ancient Israel's place in the ancient world. Without it, we'd be missing one of the most important clues connecting the history of Egypt to that of the Israelites. Number 1. The moat that protected biblical kings. Archaeologists in Jerusalem have finally cracked a 150-year-old mystery. They found a massive moat that once protected the city's kings and the sacred Temple Mount. But what makes this discovery so important? For over a century, experts were puzzled. They were unable to trace the full path of the city's northern fortifications. But now, thanks to recent digs near the old city walls at the Givati parking lot, this long-lost moat has been revealed. And guess what? It cuts right through the ancient city of David. This was essentially a secret underground barrier that helped keep Jerusalem's most important rulers safe. This moat wasn't a tiny trench like you might be picturing. Imagine a moat that's 30 feet deep and nearly 100 feet wide, basically the size of a small canyon. Archaeologists from the Israeli Antiquities Authority and Tel Aviv University believe that this massive fortification was built about 3,000 years ago. It was constructed when Jerusalem was the capital of the Kingdom of Judah. It separated the southern residential part of the city from the northern section where the palace and Temple Mount stood. It wasn't just a simple ditch. It was a giant engineering feat that was designed to show off the power of Jerusalem's kings. Why did the Temple Mount need protecting? Well, that's because it was, and still is, the holiest site in Judaism. It's the location where the first and second holy temples were built, but unfortunately they were both destroyed during ancient times. For centuries, the area acted as the spiritual center of the Jewish people. And today, it still serves as a focal point of Jewish collective identity. So no wonder a moat was built to protect this holy site. It turns out that archaeologists back in the 1960s, including the famous British archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon, were close to finding this fortification. Kenyon noticed something odd in the area's rock formations, thinking it was a natural valley. But spoiler alert, it wasn't. It wasn't until 2023 when the new team realized that she had actually uncovered part of the moat, which ran west from where she was digging. When the archaeologists pieced together these old and new findings, they realized the moat extended over 230 feet from east to west. That's a seriously big moat for keeping out invaders, and the discovery lines up with the Bible's reference to the city's topography. In the first book of Kings, King Solomon is said to have built something called the Millo, which may refer to this very moat. King Solomon was basically out there building fortifications before it was cool. The discovery has thrilled experts. As Eli Escozido, the director of the IAA, put it, excavations in the city of David never cease to amaze. And he's right. Standing at the bottom of this massive excavation, surrounded by giant stone walls, it's hard not to be impressed by what these ancient engineers accomplished. They literally reshaped the land 3,800 years ago to keep their city safe. So next time you think a moat is just for castles, think again. Jerusalem's biblical kings had one of the most impressive moats in history. After hearing about some of these insane theories and ancient texts, do you believe there's more to the story of Jesus than we've been told? Let me know in the comments down below. And while you're at it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye for now.